Hello and welcome to today's presentation, 5 Active Directory Security Settings Attackers Leverage. This event is produced in partnership with Alsid. My name is David Davis of ActualTech Media. I'll serve as your moderator on today's webinar. Thank you so much for joining us on this event. We've got a really cool event lined up for you, lots of live demos, so stay tuned for that. Before I introduce you to our expert presenter, I want to take just a moment to remind you that we encourage questions. We want this to be an educational event, so we encourage you to use the questions box. It's on the left-hand side of your audience console. I can call your attention to it that way. Of course, we appreciate all the good morning messages, but we also want to hear about your Active Directory security challenges, and we're here to help solve those. We'll be queuing up the best questions for a Q&A session at the end of the event, so get your questions in early. We also have a number of handouts. In the Handouts tab, there's information there about the Alsid charity. There's a really nice white paper on securing Active Directory, how to proactively detect attacks. There's information on Alsid for AD, which you'll see a live demo of today, as well as all the Alsid social media links to YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, as well as the Alsid blog. So make sure that you check those out. And finally, if you're watching this event on a live event, we'll be announcing the winner of an Amazon $300 gift card at the end of the webinar. If you're watching on demand, I'm sorry, of course, the drawing has already occurred. The prize terms and conditions can be found in the Handouts tab. And without any further delay, I'm excited to introduce you to today's expert presenter. That is Mr. Derek Melber, Technical Director for North America at Alsid. Derek, thanks for being on the event today.
Thank you so much, David. Really appreciate that. I am going to swap over and share my screen, so hopefully everybody can see my slide. I'm pretty excited about this topic. As I've been working, especially in 2020, on different concepts around AD, really some of the research has pointed to the fact that the attackers go after certain settings and they want to leverage certain things in AD. So that's what today is all about. If we're lucky, I'll throw in a sixth one, but certainly we'll focus on the 5 that I've brought with me. As kind of a more thorough introduction for those of you that maybe have never heard me speak before, I am a 16-time Microsoft MVP, both in group policy as well as Active Directory. Some of you may actually have this book on your desk. This was a book that was written back in the 2006 timeframe when Microsoft actually acquired the company that created group policy preferences. So this is again one of many books that I've written. This is probably one of the latest ones. I do have some extensive and very lucky speaking engagements that I've done around the world. I think last year alone in 2019, I went to 25 or 26 countries. I don't remember exactly. It was a lot of travel, but it was very eye-opening for the last 6 years to travel the world to really help organizations and administrators in different parts of the world deal with Active Directory. But I can tell you, if you haven't done much traveling or dealt with other administrators around the world, the one thing that's the same is Active Directory. It absolutely 100% is the same no matter where you go. So that was also something that I had to learn very quickly. As far as communicating with me, and I'll mention that at the beginning and the end, this is my email address. So if you do have any questions after we're done here and you can't ask me live, please email me. I'm constantly checking my email. I love to answer questions. I love to help organizations and administrators deal with certain issues that are in their environment. So whether it be Active Directory, security, group policy, you name it, throw it at me. If I don't know the answer, I know a lot of other people that hopefully can answer the question for you, and I can get that to you. Also, I'm pretty heavily involved in LinkedIn. I think it's a great platform to communicate technical information and share thoughts. And if you have an article, if you have something that is insightful, certainly this is a great place to do that. So follow me, I'll follow you back. I'm pretty active, so I try to see things and promote them in terms of making sure that everybody can see what other people are talking about. So that's a great medium for that. Okay, enough about all that. Let's get started. And what I want to do is I want to start with building blocks. When I do most of my presentations, I want to start with concepts that we can all relate to, and then start to build upon them so we understand, what the concepts are about and how we can develop a more complex talk around them. So we're going to start with the cyber kill chain because it gives us a perfect view into what is happening during an attack on our networks. And then we're going to talk specifically about the middle of the cyber kill chain, which is privilege-oriented access. This is lateral movement and privilege escalation. And we'll talk about those and where other solutions fit in compared to a proactive solution, which really is going to give us a leg up. And then we're going to dive deep into 5 specific areas that I find attackers are trying to leverage. And I see this being posted from pen testers. I see this being posted from organizations that have been breached. And honestly, I see these settings in every environment that I go into to where these are exposed. So what we need to do is understand the exposure and understand how we can shim these particular areas up. So let's first of all talk about the cyber kill chain. Now, the cyber kill chain has multiple steps. And if we kind of expose all of the steps, we can see the full breadth of what the kill chain represents. So there's 10 as you see on your slide here. If you start at the far left, 0 through 4 is really all about the endpoint. Now, I think many of us have our own conclusions or deductions, whatever you want to call it, about endpoint security. I'll just show you my hand and I'll tell you what my opinion is about endpoint security. Endpoint security is absolutely needed. We need EDR solutions. We need antivirus. We need the ability to protect the endpoint at all costs. But at the end of all of that, it is my opinion that it is impossible to secure the endpoints 100%. So if I have 100 endpoints, if I have 100,000 endpoints, one of those endpoints can be compromised. And I think that's been proven over and over. I haven't looked at the news today in terms of who was breached, but I'm certain by the end of today, someone's going to be posted that they were breached. And again, breaches start at the endpoint. So we need these things, but we really can't negate it 100%. Now, if you go to the far right of the cyber kill chain, you'll notice that we have the actual data leak. This is where the data leaves the organization in some way. Of course, today's framework, what's happening with data leaks are the attackers no longer are just putting up for ransomware. They're not encrypting and asking for a ransom. They're actually taking the data first, then they're encrypting it. And if you don't pay, that's when they post the information on the web. So, things are changing at a rapid pace. The thing that I've seen more and more over the last couple of weeks, actually, I would say 3 weeks, is that healthcare is under attack. If you're involved with healthcare in any way, that would stretch all the way from pharma all the way down to medical offices and, of course, hospitals. The amount of attacks and the effort on attacking these institutions is great. So please take the time to make sure that you are securing your stuff. Now, let's talk about 5 through 8. 5 through 8 is really the core of your identity and access management environment. And this is really where the attacker needs to get to. Because if you look, if I compromise an endpoint, I really don't have much. And I can't get to the data without going through the identity and access management, because the endpoint is only going to have access to so much information. Now, if you get lucky and you get into a domain admin, well, of course, you're going to skirt through 5 through 8, no problem. But really, the idea is that we need to protect 5 through 8. This is where Active Directory lives. And you'll notice this is where the attacker wants to move laterally. The attacker wants to gain privileges by escalating through groups and through ACLs and through services and through different concepts to be able to get into the environment. Also, you have to consider in here is group membership for the privilege groups. We also have group policy that lives in here. So what we have today is we have some tools, you'll notice up above, that are trying to help secure 5 through 8. So we have pen testing, audit tools, SIM-based tools. We have agent-based tools that deal with behavior, such as machine learning and Yuba. Now, each of these have their own fit into this area, but each of them have a significant limitation, right? Let's just look at pen testing. Pen testing is one of the most in-depth ways that you can look at security, but a pen test is good for about an hour, right? The amount of time that a pen test is good for is not very long because the pen test goes in and does a penetration test at that time, that slice of time, and 20 minutes later, the information could change. So a pen test is really good to give you a view, but it isn't constant. If you look at audit tools, these are very shallow, right? They may tell you any change that's occurring to AD, but it's not going deep into the Active Directory configurations, which is where the attacker is looking. It's also not giving you any type of recommendations on if it's a good change or bad change. And then when you kind of get down into behavior detection, this is where you're going to have a lot of false positives. And you may be looking at things in real time and you have some type of logic behind that's helping you. But let's be honest, IT people are pretty impatient, right? Hopefully all of you are shaking your heads. Yeah, I'm a pretty impatient person, because if you receive 4 bad alerts in a row, how close are you going to pay attention to that 5th alert on the same thing? You probably are going to get tired of it and go, I've seen that before. It's just that widget over there, and we really can't trust it. So we need to understand where we fit and what we need to secure. And it's my opinion that we need to take a more proactive approach at this level. Now, if we kind of break down the cyber kill chain into a list, you'll notice that first, the attackers go after the endpoints, the lowest hanging fruit. They're going to compromise the endpoint, and then they want to get local privileges. Once the attacker has local privileges over an endpoint, this is really where things start to move quickly. Because once I have privileges over an endpoint, now I can drop payload on that endpoint, right? So when I drop payload on that endpoint, it could be a tool like Bloodhound, which is a recon tool. Of course, I can drop PowerShell scripts and commandlets. I can use tools like PowerSploit. So these are things that I can take from that endpoint that's compromised, and now I can do recon on the network, and specifically Active Directory. So once I'm doing recon on Active Directory, I get the precise angle that I can take to then attack Active Directory. So once I know what to attack, now I can just go after it. There's no guessing game. And when you start looking at the tools that I just showed you with regard to recon, those tools don't require privileges. Well, let me clarify. They don't require privileges in AD. They require privileges to be installed. So whether I'm going to install them directly on the machine or drop a VM on that machine and then run it from there, and I'm going to bypass all of the local machine antivirus and EDR and everything else, now I can actually attack AD. And the goal for the attack is to gain privileges. Privileges are always what the attacker wants, whether it be membership in domain admins or enterprise admins, whether it be added to or in some group that is on an ACL, right? You can't forget group policy, because if I can get into group policy, right, now what I can do is I can ensure that I can distribute what I need to distribute, right? So this is really what I want. I want to be able to get into AD fully, not just AD itself, but into group policy, because now I can create GPOs and I can distribute what I want to every machine, because every machine is consuming group policy. But we can't forget part of privileges also include user rights. Now, user rights are per machine, but they can give you full control over a machine pretty quickly. So these are typically what the attacker is going after. And again, what they do is they enumerate AD so that they can find where they can attack most easily to gain access. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through 5 specific configurations, and I'm going to detail them out so that you fully understand kind of what you need to be looking for. And what I've done is I'm broken them down here into these 6 different bullets, and I have each of them broken down this way. And part of this is based on my experience. Part of this is based on people that I've spoken with that are also in the security area, plus just what I've seen dealing with Active Directory security and looking at this deep level. So first of all, let's talk about Kerberos delegations. You'll notice my screenshots here. I have 2 different ones. The left one is a computer. The right one is a user. So Kerberos delegations are both for users and computers. And to be honest, this is a critical threat level. This is no bones about it, very important. Because what can happen is the account, right, the user or the computer account can be impersonated. Now, when we talk about the concepts around attacking AD and being able to find someone, think about this. If I have a computer in AD that's functional, it does something today, but the attacker can impersonate that machine. How are you, the administrator or the security professional, going to be able to tell the difference between good actions and bad actions for that computer? It's going to be very difficult. That's why some of these attacks that I'm showing you are so difficult to triage, so difficult to detect, because you can't understand what's good or bad unless you actually just go to that machine or go to that user. A machine's more difficult, but a user, you can ask them what they're doing, right? Now, the commonality of this being misconfigured, 100%. I have near 100%, but I'm just going to say 100%. I have yet to see an environment, small or large, that didn't have at least one computer and one user that was configured in such a way that they could be compromised in this way. Okay? Can you secure it? Absolutely. This 100% can be secured. Is it an easy one? This is probably one of the most complicated areas, but it is something that you can go look at. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into my Active Directory environment, and we're going to take a look at some different things. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to come up here to this machine, this workstation 2015, and we're going to go to the delegation, and you'll see that I have this delegation level set. Now, this delegation level is called unconstrained delegation, okay? There are a multitude of delegation levels. We're not going to talk about all of them in this webinar, but there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 levels of delegation that you can set. Now, in this particular case, what I want you to be able to do, instead of going machine by machine and clicking, is I want you to be able to get a list of all machines that have unconstrained delegation. So over here, I have a PowerShell command that you're going to be able to do this with. Now, don't worry about taking screenshots or whatever. I can get you a single file with all of these commands in there afterwards, right? So here you can see that I'm going to run this, and this is a list of the computers. Right here is Workstation 2015 that has unconstrained delegations. So this is a quick PowerShell command that you can run so you can see all of the machines that have unconstrained delegations. The goal is that you're going to be able to go into those machines and you're going to be able to fix them so they no longer have this configuration. Now, what does that look like? Well, I'm going to take the easy approach for this one. And I'm going to come in here and say, just no longer do this. Now, when I take that unconstrained delegation away, and I come back in here to my PowerShell command, you'll notice that when I rerun it, that machine no longer shows up because I've removed that misconfiguration that an attacker can leverage, okay? Now, if you go and you look at some of the different recommendations that are out there for securing unconstrained delegation, you're going to find that many people say that you just constrain it. Well, this is where we get into that very gray area on exactly how to secure Active Directory. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump back in here, And instead of just showing you the, I guess, Microsoft view, I'm going to jump into another view, which is a view of dangerous delegations from a core AD security view. Now, you'll notice that here I'm describing exactly what the vulnerability is, and even giving recommendations on where you need to get to with regard to delegations. But the key here that I want to point out is you will notice that this computer is flagged as a security issue, but it doesn't have unconstrained delegations like this one. It has other configurations. Now, I'm going to click on this, and it's going to tell us exactly what the issue is, right? This has constrained delegations, but it's using something called protocol transition. Now, what exactly is protocol transition? Well, I'm going to go tell you. So we're now going to come back here to my domain controller, and we're going to jump into the environment, and we're going to look at Workstation 2020. Now, when I go to this delegation, you'll notice it's not on unconstrained delegation, but for specified services. You'll notice that it's using any protocol, right? This is the protocol transition. If I move it to Kerberos only, it is going to secure this particular computer from the majority of impersonation attacks. Now, our goal here is to reduce our attack surface as much as possible. Unfortunately, with computer constrained, no matter what level delegation, it's almost impossible to secure the computer 100%. But you need it, right? You absolutely need to have computers have some level of Kerberos delegation, okay? Now, let's also not forget that we need to address users, okay? Now, with regard to users, users also have potential delegation. So if I come over here and I look at Maximus, you'll see that Maximus is said to have membership in the enterprise admins group, but the delegation is open up. So if I go look at what that looks like, I'm going to find Maximus right here, and I'm going to go into Maximus's properties for the account, and you'll notice that the account is sensitive and cannot be delegated is not selected. So that means it is delegated. So if I come in here and I select this, and then I allow this, you will notice that Alsid is going to recognize that as something that was fixed, and it's going to take the user out of the list, and you'll see that that's been cleaned up. Now, this is the type of thing that I try to explain the depth of what the attacker is looking at. You can't just go in and look at a cursory level. You have to look at the depth of what's going on. And that's exactly what Alsid does. It allows you to see that depth in very easy to read words on exactly how to understand the vulnerability and also how to clean it up. So that gives you a view on both the user and the computer delegations and where you need to go in order to secure them. But these are things that I see, unfortunately, in every environment, and they all need to be cleaned up, or they need to be tracked, and additional security settings can be set on them to make sure that we're securing those machines. Next, let's go in and let's talk about service principal names. Now, service principal names, similar to Kerberos delegations, are needed in every environment. SPNs are what allow the operating system to know which accounts are taking care of which services so that they can optimize that communication and also grant the correct privileges. So they're needed in every AD domain. The threat level is critical, okay? This is really where the concept of Kerberosing comes in. Kerberosing is the idea that I'm going to be able to get some information from the account, and then I'm going to be able to break into the password offline. And since I did it offline, no one can recognize that I'm attacking the account. Once I have the password, now I can come in, and now I can basically look like that machine and gain access as that machine. So Just like the Kerberos delegations, I've never seen an environment not have these be secured. And yes, you can secure them. The idea is that you remove the service principal name from users in privileged groups, right? So SPNs are for users. The users, if they're in a privileged group, become an attack vector. So what exactly does this look like? So let's jump back into my domain. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a PowerShell command to find out which machines have SPNs. So here's my PowerShell command. Again, I can get you these. And you'll notice that I have an account, James Bond, which has not one, but two SPNs. Yes, that's right. Users can have a multitude of SPNs. So this is something we also need to be looking at, is the depth of how these things are configured. Now, if I go and find James Bond within my Active Directory environment, let's see if I can find James here. James is not there. Most likely James is moved back over here, and there's James. Now, where do I see SPNs? Well, you're going to go to your attribute editor, and you're going to go to service principal name. So right here, you will see service principal name, and this is where you list them, and you can add additional ones. This is typically created automatically when you install a service and point the service to which service account's going to support it, okay? Now, let's think about that for just a minute. Let's say that in the year 2005, 2006, whatever year it was, you install Exchange, and then you point Exchange to the service account that's going to be running it. And then all of a sudden, you point to a different Exchange environment and you deprecate the one that you installed. Do you think that that original service account is going to be cleaned up for not having that SPN anymore? Absolutely not. That's why this PowerShell command is so important, so that we can pull out all the accounts and see all of the SPNs so that we know what to actually secure. Okay. Now, if we look at this from a view on what kind of Alsid is pointing at, Alsid also looks at SPNs, right? So I can come in here and I can see which accounts are being triggered based on, instead of just raw information, actually looking at the overall picture. Now you'll notice that the PowerShell command gave me two accounts. Alsid is only pointing at one. This is the technology that Alsid is using, which is called graph theory, which is an attack pathway type of technology. It's looking at attack pathways in the back end, so you know exactly what to look for and why you need to look at that. So this gives you that view. This is contextual information, where if I'm just looking at PowerShell, there's no context here. I really don't have any information except for, well, that user has one. I don't know if it's good or bad. What do I do? And that's really where a tool that gives you context can come in and help you out. So that gives you some information on how to find and resolve SPNs, right? Again, the whole idea is you never want to have a user that requires an SPN to be in a privileged group. If you take it out of the privileged group, it's going to help protect the account, because if it is Kerberosted, well, the account doesn't have much access. It's not a privileged user. Next, let's talk about primary group ID. Now, primary group ID is a legacy setting. Now, I know some of you probably use primary group IDs still today, but you typically don't use them in the same way that they were used in the past. Now, let's talk about both in the past and today. In the past, primary group IDs were used to help Unix and POSIX environments understand which group a user was most associated with, primary group. Now, each group in AD has a RID, a relative identifier. You'll notice in my screenshot here, it says group RID, right? Domain admins, right? Admins here, domain admins is 512. Enterprise admins, I think, is 517. Again, you can go into AD. Each group RID is associated with a primary group ID that's a potential setting. So if I wanted a user in POSIX to seem like a domain admin, I would set the primary group ID to 512, and it now functions as a domain admin. But we don't have POSIX anymore. This was eliminated. But still, we have users that have configurations from the legacy world giving them these privileges. Now, let's talk about the current, and let's talk about how this is being exploited. The current is, I see often someone will create a group ID, right, of whatever group it is, right, again, the RID, and then they'll associate that with the group so that they can track it, right, in coding, whatever it is. So that's a way that it can be used today, and I see that quite often, believe it or not. Now, how is it exploited? Well, normally the way this is exploited is through a DC shadow attack. Now, a DC shadow attack is when someone puts a fake domain controller into the real domain controllers and then pushes settings out through the real domain controllers from the fake one. It's very difficult to modify primary group IDs outside of just manual settings, but you can actually do it if you're modifying the replication stream directly, because it's a direct LDAP call. So this is a way that you can update the primary group ID without actually going through the GUI and doing it. So usually one of the top DC shadow attacks is primary group ID. Another one is SID history. Both of these are very common because they give immediate access as another user or as a privileged account. So that's how these are set up. Now, let's go into our environment and let's take a look at how we're going to be able to see these. So you'll notice that I have another command here to get all the users to have a primary group ID other than 513. Remember, 513 is domain users. So I have a couple here. You'll notice that I have Maximus and I have guest. Now, if I go in and I look at what Alsid is telling me, I'm going to see yet a different view because Alsid has this technology in the background to help you understand what's good and what's bad because it's contextual. And you'll notice that guest is not listed here, but Maximus is. And it's actually saying that Maximus 519, sorry, I was off by 2, is in the enterprise admins. It has a primary group ID of enterprise admins. So this is the type of thing that you need some technology to help you see things so that you know what to look for and how you're going to go secure it. Now, how would we secure this? Well, what we can do is we can go find Maximus. We do not need Maximus's primary group ID to be the enterprise admins. So what we can do is come in here to the attribute editor, come down to primary group ID, and I could actually change this right here, and I would want to change that to 513. Okay? So these are the things that we can do to ensure that we are securing our existing AD. Now, I want to talk about two things here. When you're looking at securing AD, there's really two components. There's more than that, but I'm going to break it down into two. There is, you need to go into your existing AD and fix the stuff that's broken already. It could have been there for 12 years, you don't know, but you need to fix what's there now. Secondly, as soon as you fix it, you need to make sure it's maintained at that level. So you need to monitor and alert if it changes. Well, that's where Alsid comes in. It does both. It absolutely does both. And it does the second piece in real time automatically. So it is constantly looking for any modification that occurs. And if any modification is triggered, it's going to notify you so you can go take immediate action to fix it. Next, admin SD holder. This is kind of a unique setting. Not unique in that it's different from AD to AD. It's just unique in kind of how it functions. Now, every AD has an admin SD holder object, and the level of threat is critical because of what it does. And this allows a privilege escalation attack. So I find in almost every environment, this is near 100, it's not 100, it's near 100, that I see this misconfigured. And often what I see is legacy groups and users that are configured on this. Now let's describe exactly what this does. In order to do that, I want to jump into my Active Directory environment, and we're going to go find admin SD holder, and then I'm going to describe the process. So here is admin SD holder. You'll notice it's under system. And if you right click and go to properties, you can see that you have a security tab. Now the security tab is the access control list for admin SD holder. So how does this work? Well, admin SD holder is part of a process called SD prop. SD prop stands for security descriptor propagation. What is it propagating to? Well, the process propagates to all of your privileged accounts, right? Domain admins, enterprise admins, group policy creator owner. So the way that SD prop works is by default, every 60 minutes, this ACL is used as a template, and it replaces all of your privileged accounts, users, and groups that have an admin count equal to 1. That's how it knows which account it's going to replace the admin SD holder ACL with. So you'll notice here that if I go to any account that has an admin count 1, every 60 minutes, its ACL, right, its security list is going to be replaced with the admin SD holder ACL. And you'll notice right here, I did not add this user to this list, SD prop did. So think about that. If I go into admin SD holder and I add a user or group to this security list within 60 minutes, that user or group is now going to have whatever privilege you give it here to every privileged account. It's a pretty slick attack if you ask me. I mean, it's kind of an easy way to get in the background. So ideally, what you want to be able to see is what the issues are. Now, if I go to admin SD holder, and granted, I have a really bad name for my account, but if I just name this Joe or I name this group 20, how would I know that it's a problem, right? Well, this is really where context comes in and helps you understand what's going on. Of course, we are looking at the admin SD holder object and its ACL all the time. And you'll notice here that we can flag it. But the next level that we can go into is we can look into the details around this, and we can expose for you which entry is actually a problem. So we show you the security descriptor, and we can drill down into the access control entries, color code them for you, and tell you which ones are an issue. Now, what is the chance that 1208 is the actual RID for that object? Well, let's go look. So here I'm going to come back over to my attacker account, which I think is here. Where did attacker go? Oh, where did my attacker go? Let's see. So instead of this, I'm going to show you a quick little trick. So I'm going to come in here, and you'll notice that I've already put this SID in here, and you'll notice that attacker is showing up. So I actually did a lookup for which RID was which account, and you'll see here that attacker, that object, right, there's the distinguished name, has the 1208. So now I know exactly which one it is. So you're able to track down, and this is kind of the threat hunting capability that Alsid provides as well, which is a little bit unique for most of these security solutions. So that's how you can track down entries on admin SD holder, and you can go clean them up. The other thing that I wanted to show you is the command for this. So I have commands for everything that I'm showing you. So admin SD holder ACL, and I can run it. And so I can see it, but you see there's no context. I just have the ACL here. But you will notice at the, let's see, where is attacker? Attacker should be right here, right? So it's showing up on the list, but again, it's very difficult to see this stuff. But at least you can get the list by using, in this case, a built-in command DSACLs. All right, let's move on. So we're going to end this is our 5th one, remember, with the Kerberos ticketing service account. The Kerberos ticketing service account, this is the root of a golden ticket attack. And if you get a hold of this and you're able to generate your own tickets, you can do whatever you want. So Microsoft recommends that you reset the password for this account basically every 2 years at the worst case scenario. I think most security professionals are going to recommend that you change this maybe every 6 to 12 months to make sure that you are reducing the attack surface of this. So how do you know where you are with this? Well, let's jump back in and let's look at our Kerberos user. This is the command that you can run to get all of the attributes for the account. And so right here, if I scroll up, you can see that the password last set date is 3/19. So this actually isn't a problem, right? It's when I get out to 2 years or whatever cycle that you want. So this is basically another check that attackers use, and they know that if you haven't reset this account, it's going to be, a more easy password. And so as they move around the environment, they can gather passwords. This is the whole lateral movement and privilege escalation concept. If I can start to gather passwords, I can start to use passwords that are known to the environment to then get into these different machines, and then I can create a golden ticket. This is probably for larger organizations one of the scariest things is the ability to detect a golden ticket attack. Alsid will be able to detect a golden ticket attack come December timeframe, so just in time for Christmas. And we will be doing it with no privileges and no agents. That's right, I'll say it again. Alsid will be able to detect a golden ticket attack with a standard user account and nothing installed on any domain controller. It's pretty cool. So keep your eye out for that one. That is a pretty big thing that's on our horizon. So those are our 5 things. And where we've been today is we talked about the foundations, which is the cyber kill chain. And this is really the process and the steps the attackers are using to get our data. And so we need to protect the keys of the kingdom, which is Active Directory, because this is where the privileges lie, and we need to protect those privileges. We need to proactively protect the privileges. If you're relying on an AD monitoring solution or a SIM only, then by the time you see it, it's done. You didn't protect anything. You were just told, yeah, you didn't protect it, and the attacker compromised it. And then we went through 5 different areas, from Kerberos delegations for computers and users, all the way down through the Kerberos ticketing service account on where attackers are getting in. And I showed you PowerShell commands, and I showed you where to go in and secure these particular areas. So this gives you a list of things to do for the rest of the day. And for some of you in smaller environments, actually maybe could be done in a day or two. For those of you that have a bigger environment, this is more difficult because you don't have the context on what is actually good or bad, which is where Alsid fits in and can help you with that. So that kind of gets us to the end of what I wanted to talk about. David, do we have any questions out there?
Absolutely, yeah. Great presentation, Derek. We do have some questions for you from the audience. First question that came in, I wanted to ask you about this one. This is a good question here. They're saying, you said that Alsid can get all of this info without agents or privileges. Can you explain a little bit more detail exactly how is that possible?
Absolutely. So the method that Alsid is using to gather the information, right? Let's not talk about the analysis, because the analysis is easy once you've gathered the information. The way that Alsid does this is it taps into the existing replication API that's currently used between your domain controllers to replicate AD. So we tap into that replication API that's already existing, and it only requires read access. So we actually aren't looking at any logs. Our view is if you're looking at a log, it's too late. You've already been compromised. So we are very proactive. And by looking at the replication stream and then analyzing that with our graph theory technology, we're able to see the relationships between the objects and tell you if a particular modification or configuration actually could be leveraged by an attacker.
Very cool. Very cool what you guys are doing there. Another question, and we got a lot of good questions rolling in. I encourage everyone to keep them coming. They're asking, I have an AD monitoring tool. Isn't that enough for me to track AD changes?
It is enough to track AD changes, but it isn't enough to be a security solution. Let me give you an example. Many AD monitoring solutions are being sold because they say that they can tell you failed logons. Okay, if I give you a report of every user that's failed to log on in the last 30 days, what does that indicate about security? It just means that people fat finger their password. It really doesn't give you any indication about your current level of security. So an AD monitoring solution is just that. It monitors changes, but it doesn't give you any context around the change. Is it a good change? Is it a bad change? Even if it's a good change and you need it, did it open up an attack pathway? So yes, you need AD monitoring solutions for your auditors, right? Because they're going to ask for all these changes, but it's not going to help you day in and day out, minute by minute, securing Active Directory. That's really where Alsid fits in. So I kind of see Alsid filling the gap between a SIM and an AD monitoring solution. The SIM is looking at logs, AD monitoring is looking at changes, but neither one of them are security related. You need a security solution to tell you if the changes and if things that have been modified actually are security related.
Got it. Okay. And you may have already answered this one, but they said I already have a SIEM. How will Alsid help me with AD security?
So if you look at most SIMs, they are awesome at breadth. They can get the security logs from all your devices, workstations, servers, domain controllers, routers, printers, everywhere, right? And they can consume this information, but it takes some massive configuration to be able to analyze the information to an in-depth degree. So that's why SIMs typically gather from all devices, but only give maybe a top 10 or 20 triggers for that device. And when you're looking at a domain controller, Alsid looks at hundreds of different settings, not to mention the interrelation between those settings. And if you look at most SIMs, even some of the most prevalent ones, they're looking at maybe 15 or 20, and it's mostly login stuff, and it's not looking at the depth of where you need to look at. So again, a SIM is awesome for what it's doing. It just unfortunately doesn't help with day-to-day proactive security of AD.
Got it. Okay. Excellent. Let's see. Another question here is configured delegation safer than unconstrained delegation? I'm not sure I
Yes, so
understand. You got that?
I
Okay.
think they meant constrained. I think they meant constrained. So if you go to the different delegations, you have unconstrained, you have constrained with protocol transition, you have Kerberos constrained, and then you have resource-based constrained delegation. Typically, when you get to the resource-based, that may be the most secure, but it's very difficult to manage and configure. So ideally, you want to get to the Kerberos constrained delegation, which is that third tier. That gets you the best of both worlds. It gets you that higher level of security, but it doesn't get you that pain threshold of trying to configure and maintain it like resource-based.
Got it. Okay. And then this question, this is like a 7-part question.
Seven
Grant's got a
parter.
lot of a lot of questions here all in one. So he says, if local privileges are obtained and recon is happening on the Active Directory, is it doomsday? And then what
Um,
defensive step is best to first take? Is it typically worse
so
for users? Go ahead.
So let's take the first one. Is it doomsday? It depends, right? I mean, if let's look at it this way. Let's say that you work in an office building and there's 20 different organizations in that office building. If the front door is supposed to be locked, if the attacker gets into the front door, does that mean that they've compromised every business? It depends on what the security is of that business. So if you look at your enterprise as the front door is the workstation, just because they've compromised a workstation, does that mean that they have access to everything in Active Directory? I hope not. And that's what today's webinar is all about. Today's webinar is getting you to focus on the fact that you must secure AD, because that's where they're going next. They're going to go after that next. Then you asked, where do I begin? Well, you need to, there's actually a very, very good white paper that Microsoft wrote about endpoint security. Fantastic. It's least privilege. It's awesome. Do all those steps, right? Examples. Don't give your users local admin on their desktop. Don't allow help desk and administrators to log on directly to a workstation, because it caches the information and they can go after that. These are the types of things that you can do. Put up firewalls on your endpoints. Make sure that you have EDR in place. I mean, all of these things are fantastic. The next step is, what do? Is you secure AD. So you go in, you make sure that everything that an attacker can leverage is secured and locked down. And if any configuration opens up a new attack pathway, you take immediate action and shut that down so the attacker can't leverage that.
Excellent. All right. And another part here to this question is it typically worse for users to be set up with multiple SPNs?
I think it is. The mantra is always individual user, individual service, individual machine. That's the mantra, because you can lose control of that pretty quickly, but it's also more work, right? I mean, it is a lot more work, but you should have service accounts supporting services individually, not at a multitude, in my opinion.
Okay. And then another question from Grant. He's asking, where do you see these kind of attacks going in the next 5 years or in the future?
The same as they are today. Unless we take a different approach to security, we're going to see them every day. We're going to see them absolutely every day. We cannot take the attitude anymore that, okay, we have a SIM, we do pen testing twice a year, we do audits, we're good. We're being embarrassed that that's enough. They're needed. I'm not saying those aren't needed, but we need something that is giving us the proactive nature at an in-depth level. Someone asked me the other day, they weren't really a Microsoft person, and they're like, well, how prevalent is on-prem AD? It's everywhere. I mean, I have yet to meet more than 5 organizations around the world. Remember, I went to 25 countries last year, around the world, that have only AD in the cloud. They have on-prem AD and they have Azure AD. They have a hybrid. So on-prem AD isn't going anywhere. And unless we secure it, these attacks are going to continually be there every day. So we need to think differently. And I don't think it's that radical. I just think we need to introduce another concept that we haven't introduced, and it will help dramatically.
Excellent. Joseph is asking, is there any way to get access to these PowerShell commands that you showed here?
Absolutely. My email is right there on your screen. You're going to email and say, send me the PowerShell commands. It's a single file, and I'll send it to you. No
Perfect.
problem.
Constantine's asking, does Alsid audit any changes in Active Directory?
So the word audit. So this is where I'm going to jump back in. So let me show you what it looks like from the Alsid perspective. Remember, we are gathering information from the replication stream, right? We only communicate with the PDC emulator. We pull that information in and we call it the trail flow, right? So you'll see here on my screen that I'm looking at every change that's coming through AD. This is every change that's coming through AD. And so this is where you can actually leverage that. So for example, let's say that you want to go in and look at domain admins, right? And you want to see everything that's changed with domain admins. This gets you a view on everything that's changed with domain admins. And you'll see here that, you have a value at event and the current value. So we're showing you what's going on. Now, this may not meet the requirements of your auditor because it's kind of raw data, but it depends on what you mean by audit. Are we an audit tool? No, we are not an audit tool. This is not something that's being used for, PwC or Deloitte's audit, because they're not really looking at security. They're looking at process and they're looking at overall picture. We're looking at raw security across the board, and we actually do that. If I kind of show you a view of all the indicators, we're looking at a pretty in-depth view from a very critical level to low level of what's going on. And each of these indicators of exposure can have up to 20 different things that are going on inside. So we organize it for you, give you context so you can make sure that security is always in place.
Thank you for answering all those questions, Derek. We've got so many questions coming in. I'm afraid we don't have time to get to all of them with our time slot running short here. We'll have to get back to these electronically after the event. But thank you, everyone, for all the excellent questions. And thank you, Derek, for your really awesome presentation and live demo. I want to encourage everyone to visit alsid.com for more information to learn about how to better secure your Windows Active Directory and prevent these sort of malicious attacks and ransomware infestations from happening before they ever start. We'll see you next time, and have a great day.